You've seen those old, ancient maps, right? The ones with all the fantastical sea monsters drawn in the oceans where nobody had ever been? We're always told, oh, that was just mythology, just products of overactive, fearful imaginations. But what if they were actually a clue? A clue to something way more profound about our planet, something that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating alternative theory, one that reframes these monsters not as living creatures, but as something essential to how our world even works. We're going to explore this idea of Earth as a kind of biological motherboard.
The story we're usually sold, it always starts with fear. These giant, sleeping creatures under the waves, just waiting to wake up, a threat to all of us. It's basically the script for a classic monster movie, and it's designed to make us feel pretty small and pretty powerless.
Now, the source material for this whole explainer, it suggests this narrative is no accident. It's a deliberate script. But the theory here proposes a completely different way to interpret what we're seeing on satellite maps and on deep-sea sonar. A totally different story.
And this is where things get really interesting, because we can completely flip that script. The theory moves away from a story about monsters and instead tells a story about mechanics, about a living, breathing, functional planet.
So that's the big question, isn't it? If we just set aside the idea of sleeping krakens and giant sea serpents for a minute, what are these huge, winding shapes all over the ocean floor? Well, the alternative proposed here is less about biology and a whole lot more about geology.
This theory calls them Titan remains, and the idea is that these aren't creatures waiting to wake up at all. Nope, they are the petrified, totally fossilized remains of giant life from a past age. So think of them not as a threat, but more like geological anchors, like the actual circulatory system of the planet itself.
So you've got these two competing ideas. On one side, you have the chaotic, terrifying narrative of monsters waking up to destroy everything. But on the other, this theory presents a structured, almost predictable system. These are just geological features reactivating as part of a completely natural cycle. It's a huge shift from chaos to order.
And this new interpretation, it doesn't just apply to weird shapes on a map. No, it extends to very real geological events that we see happening all the time. We all know about the Ring of Fire, that super intense belt of earthquakes and volcanoes all around the Pacific Ocean. The fear narrative might tell you, oh, that's a monster stirring in its sleep. But this theory, it proposes something more like planetary maintenance, like the Earth's own energy grid is just performing a system reboot.
And it's described as this really clear four-step process. First, what the theory calls etheric energy increases in the atmosphere. This builds up pressure inside those petrified veins. Then, the grid itself starts to realign and straighten out. And that physical realignment is what we experience as seismic activity. It's a way for the planet to shake off old, inefficient energy patterns, which the theory calls dull code, kind of like clearing out junk files from a computer.
Okay, so if these are geological anchors and they're part of some energy grid, how does this planetary hardware actually work? What are these veins even supposed to be made of?
The key, according to this whole idea, is in their composition. Because these Titan remains are the result of biological petrification, they're made of this high-mineral, crystalline stone. And that crystalline structure would theoretically make them incredible superconductors. Basically, natural high-conductivity meridians.
So try to picture this. These massive, ancient ridges are the planet's wiring. They carry the Earth's magnetic pulse all across the oceans. And where you see something that looks like a head or a tail, well, you're actually seeing a terminal node, like a junction box where the energy connects with the continental plate.
And what's really fascinating is how this idea connects to other alternative historical theories. The thinking here is that ancient advanced civilizations, like the one known in these theories as the Tartarian Empire, they knew all about this system. They supposedly built their amazing structures, like all those domes, directly on top of these energy nodes so they could tap into a free, clean planetary power source.
All right, this brings us to the final part of the theory, which kind of zooms out to look at the bigger picture. If the Earth has this incredibly intricate energy system, what does that mean for us and for all the life on it?
Just look at this image. Doesn't it look like a nervous system? Or maybe a network of neurons? This theory draws a direct parallel between the macro-level design of the planet and the micro-level design within biology. It's that ancient concept, right? As above, so below.
Now, this is a pretty profound idea.
These ridges aren't just carrying power, they're carrying information. They are planetary synapses. So when we see activity along these lines, maybe it's not destruction. According to this view, it could just be a thought, passing through the consciousness of a living planet.
A really great way to visualize this is through the movie Avatar. You remember how all the plants, the animals, and the Na'vi were all connected through Aiwa and the Tree of Souls? Well, this theory suggests Earth is the same way. One massive interconnected system where energy and information flow through everything.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, the theory really calls for a fundamental shift in our own mindset. It suggests we should stop feeding what it calls fear parasites by buying into all these narratives of destruction. Instead, we could view something like the Ring of Fire not as a threat, but as a sign of the Earth's strength. The whole idea is to recognize our planet as this self-regulating system and ultimately to just see all these connections with new eyes.
And that really just leaves us with a final, provocative thought to chew on. If our planet really is this vast, self-regulating, clean energy machine, this biological motherboard, what is our role in it? What does it even mean for us to truly connect? And how would we even begin to plug in?